my name is Linda Shaw. I'm currently the STEM specialist inside the Learning Commons for tutoring services. But I've actually been at COD for the last 8 years, starting as a peer tutor when I first got out of high school and just sort of gradually worked my way up until I was the STEM specialist here. So now I get to advise all the tutors and sort of work with the professors in setting up guided study groups, things like that. There's a few different ways to answer this, and it sort of depends on what operational level the student is on. So if you're just at the counting stage of math, where you're first learning 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, then a lot of students will answer that the biggest number is the largest number that they've encountered. So you may get answers like 50 or 60, things like that. Once they reach the addition stage, then students tend to have a wider idea. So that's where you may get bigger numbers like 1,000, 2,000, a billion, things like that. Once we get into multiplication, then students expound on this even more. So getting into trillions, billions, that kind of idea. But once we reach exponentiation, then that's when it really takes off. So that's when you're getting into a Google, which most students, fresh out of high school, then they may say that this is the biggest number that they've heard of. So infinity, while it is a concept, does not actually represent a finite number. So can technically answer this question, but it's a little bit of a cheap cutout, right? So the biggest number that we've actually experienced is called Graham's number. So this is the number that holds the record for the largest number used in a serious mathematical proof. And it was actually in the Guinness Book of World Records back in 1980. But the biggest observable number, Graham's number is, I believe, would be 10 to the 185th power. So that is a very, very, very large number. And that is the number of how many of the smallest volumes can fit into the biggest volume that we know. So that is the largest visualizable number that we know of. If you were to just ask any random student, though, then a Google is probably their default answer, although a Googleplex would actually be a 1 with a Google of zeros after it. So this is, again, where we get into that exponentiation that goes on multiple levels. So whereas a Google is 10 to the 100th power, then a Googleplex would be 10 to the 10th to the 100th. So now we're on 3 different levels of having powers there. Pi, approximately 3.14, is definitely not going to be the largest number, although it may be one of the longest numbers. So in terms of length, then the decimal of pi does keep going forever. But I mean, I can tell you right now that 4 is going to be a bigger number than pi. So with the sort of finite numbers that we've been talking about, then the more you get into mathematics, the more you're going to be working with more abstract concepts. So even though I stated that infinity wouldn't technically be the largest number, then there's actually different levels of infinity that we have to consider as well. So is it a countable number of infinity? So in this case, what I'm talking about is, can we label each spot? So is that, can I assign everything to be 1, 2, 3, 4? Which position in the counting sequence is it? Whereas if I have an uncountable number, then that would be, I have no way to label any of the spots, right? The numbers are coming at me faster than I can give them a position. So for this, then, I actually really suggest people look into the short story, Welcome to Hotel Infinity. It gives a really great depiction of what it's like having different levels of infinity working together and how to manipulate an infinite amount of numbers to come up with a finite, workable solution.
Have you always been curious about the science around you? Submit your question and it can be featured in one of our upcoming videos. Visit cod.edu/STEM and click on So That Explains It.